This is Oliver here, and you're watching Teacher Learning Cast with Piry Herrera and Benjamin Stewart.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Teacher Learning Cast, episode number 2. My name is Benjamin Stewart.
And at the other end, this is Piry Herrera from Aguascalientes, Mexico, starting our second show, Benjamin, which I'm very glad we managed to accomplish this adventure since last week.
Absolutely, it's a beautiful day here in beautiful Aguascalientes. And we're anxious to get started with this. We've been talking about it for some time now. We started last week, and we're happy to know that we have a few followers already in Facebook. If you want to get involved in the broadcast, we want to make this a podcast community as much as possible where you can be an active participant. So we are always looking for people to participate in the live event with us, and also those who want to participate via just different forums that we have. We have a Facebook page at Teacher Learning Cast. Feel free to join the page and post your comments and suggestions based on what we're talking about each week.
And I'm also transmitting in Facebook Live for some people. And if you want to have a better view, well, you just click on the link above and you will go to the streaming, which right now we just have the view of the background. We still don't have the streaming there, I guess. Maybe there's a lag delay or something, but we are about to have the live streaming going on there. And today, last week, we were discussing a couple of things about Creative Commons. We were discussing about technology that speeds up communication with the students. And for this week, we have a couple of issues we want to discuss with you. And Benjamin, what do you have for this week?
Well, I'll go ahead and share my screen today. I wanted to talk about, I came across an article called Making Teaching Personal. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen here going so that you can actually see the article.
Right. Let me tell you that since the moment I saw the title you chose for the topic today, it was catchy. It made me think a lot of things. So I'm really intrigued to know what is that about, making teaching personal. It sounds like a fight or something.
Exactly. Well, if you look at, this was an article, I don't know now if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, but Rachel Apley posted a really nice piece this week in Oxford University Press, where she was talking about sharing a story she had with some of her students. She unfortunately had her briefcase stolen, and I think her passport was stolen as well. And she actually found out a way later on to really incorporate that experience in with her student. And I want to read one paragraph in particular because I think it shows a lot of insight and some of her conclusions that she drew from having this experience and really sharing this unfortunate set of circumstances with her students. She states, "Of course, it was only with hindsight that it dawned on me what a golden opportunity this was and how much I could exploit it. After all, this was my upper intermediate insurance class. Without hesitation, they started firing questions at me about the contents of my bags, the value of the items in question, exactly what had happened, whether I was insured, and so on. They then insisted on helping me fill in the claim form so as to get the best deal possible. I couldn't have broken this news to a more sympathetic or expert group. They gave me insights into the industry that I'd never known otherwise. In return, we worked on form filling, question forms, formal insurance language versus everyday spoken English, the passive, and much more besides. My longer-term course plan was ditched for the next few weeks, but during these weeks, attendance rose, and engagement and involvement was higher than it had ever been. You know, and when I read this, especially this particular paragraph, it really, you know, a lot of things jumped out at me. You know, because sometimes I think that we get so caught up in our own lesson planning and what we're doing in class that we kind of feel like we are almost restricted to just doing what's in the lesson plan, even if it's our own, even if it's of our own doing. But I think this is a really good example where she found a teachable moment that this particular set of circumstances, she was able to bring this experience to the class, and they actually became the experts and started to give her advice, what she could do, actually started helping her like she mentioned, fill out the forms and so on. So I don't know, I found this really interesting, and it made me reflect on my own teaching and really how much, first of all, what it means to make teaching personal, and then in my own particular case, how often I do that. Do I do it to get the most out of the teaching experience, the learning experience in my own class? I don't know, Piry, what did you think about when you read this article?
Well, it's really interesting, and with the comments you're just making, it raises a lot of memories to my mind about what the students talk about. I work with, and we work with teachers' information, and one of the issues that very often come is following the lesson plan or not. When they are information, they are really afraid of going out of the lesson plan. And when they start to get out of the lesson plan, they don't know how far they can go. So it's a really interesting question. And I think it's a good example what this story on that issue, right? How it may raise a little bit more of curiosity by students. But you also mentioned something important, which I kind of rephrase in the idea of students leading the classroom. And that's another really important aspect, we can discuss about advantages of disadvantages of bringing these personal issues on how personal can you make it when it comes to your life. But I think you nailed it with that comment, students leading the classroom. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that she found an opportunity, and it's hard to know exactly just by reading the article because it is fairly brief, but I feel like that she made a decision at some point. She reflected on this experience, this bad experience, and thought, okay, there is a teachable moment. And probably some of her decision making was based on the fact that the students could take ownership of their own learning by her sharing that experience. And I think, again, the example would be them filling out the forms. They became the experts. That she saw that based on the profile of this class, because this particular class was an insurance class. So this was a content-based class. And so part of their learning was about insurance and that type of thing. So she found an opportunity for them to really turn the situation around and say, okay, maybe she's their client and the roles may have reversed. And so she kind of took it upon herself to say, okay, this is what I need. What would you do in this type of situation? And really just bring out a couple of lessons that really help the students to really engage in this type of class. I think that it is kind of a delicate situation. I think anytime that we make our lives, available to our students, and to what degree that we make our teaching personal. And I think all of our egos, I think we have to have our egos in check, and when we look at to what degree we make it personal. And I think this is a very good example where it does work, but I think we can also imagine maybe situations where it might go too far if we're, maybe sharing too much about ourselves. Maybe I think it really depends on the teacher, depends on the group of students, and I think it also depends a lot on the awareness that the teacher has about the students, knowing the students, and really what their comfort level is, what their knowledge base is, and what the goals of the course are.
Yeah. You know, I'm amazed by all these comments because with a simple chunk of an article, many things come to my mind. Right now, I'm thinking about my ESP group. They're carrying out a needs analysis. I'm thinking about my teaching workshop students. I'm thinking about many aspects that in which we can analyze this. So I'm happy we have this space because we can share this kind of things. But something you mentioned is about the in progress decisions in the classroom in combination with the final comment you made about awareness, which I totally agree. If you that's the lead for your in progress decision, the awareness of everything, of students themselves, of yourself, your previous experiences, activities you have planned before, and you know how to handle, and that's how you can improvise. And I'm doing a quotation, quoting marks and at the screen, and because it's not really an improvisation. It's bringing back something you already done, you are aware of, and then making a decision. And this is what we want pre-service teachers to do, to start developing this skill of quick, fast reflection, that we are doing it step by step, little by little information. But once you are in service, it's seconds, and you make that decision and you go there, and then you flip a class into students leading it. I like that.
Yeah, and I think it's, although she made it sound in the article that she kind of deviated from the lesson plan and then she came back to the lesson plan.
Right.
And although that may have been the case, I would dare say that what she did in the class with this particular experience still was very much in line with the course objectives. So
Right.
although she may have deviated from the lesson plan, I think it's important to note that it's still, we're still within the confines of the course. Because we're in formal education, we're helping pre-service and service teachers and English language trainers, and so we're for the most part helping them train to work in some sort of formal educational context. For example, working in schools where there's a syllabus, there's a curriculum. So giving that context, of course, informal learning is a total different situation. But if we are looking at formal education, we are, we have to look at the course objectives. So I think her ability here was to turn a real life situation or a real life experience and bring it into the course, still maintaining the course objective. So I think this is important too for teacher trainers to consider. Is, it's one thing, and I agree that it's very important to try to plan ahead and make really good lesson plans. But I don't know about you, PD, but I'm constantly looking for certain situations. I'll be driving down the street in my car and on the way to work and think, oh, well, I'm going to try this today. I'm going to try that today. And I think with experience, you bring in these types of personal experiences, and to the degree that you think benefit the students.
Yeah, I go for that too. I'm always whenever something happens that it's catchy, that it clicks in my mind, to bring to the classroom. Just one of the key aspects is that you have to know what's the objective for the following class. You have to be aware of what is going to come next, and so whenever something happens, you are not just thinking about the activity or the catchy aspect or the contextualized aspect. You have the objective in mind, and that's what makes the connection. And this is really important because sometimes we focus too much in the activity that we lose track of the objective. And but this is a nice example of how to make a combination. He never lost track of what could be next in the classroom and bring those activity and raise interest, because in fact, this is one of the aspects of ESP. You need to have constant communication with your students so you know what you can get from them. And there are things they for sure will know more than you, because in ESP, in occupational purposes specifically, they will know more about the field than the teacher. So there are many things that they already can handle and bring into the classroom. So I totally go for that too. I agree with this idea, and leads me to the idea of contextualization.
Yeah, I'd like to remind everyone that our today's broadcast, if you want to follow us on Facebook, you can certainly do that just by searching Teacher Learning Cast. And we do have a Facebook page where you can find all upcoming broadcasts. We really encourage all of you to participate. We're always looking for those who want to participate in our live broadcast, in our Hangouts on air. We really want to get more pre-service and in-service teachers involved in the conversation. You can also get involved in the conversation by just simply posting basically in Facebook. That's probably the best bet, but you can also follow us online. I have a website, and that's located at benjaminlstewart.wordpress.com, and Piry has his website.
Yeah, Ben, I just want to heads up. I think the live streaming right now on YouTube is not going on, but we're still recording the session, and we have this live streaming through different sources, and you can have access on demand later on. So because I'm asking the followers in Facebook to click on the link above and go to the original streaming, but I can see at the screen that it's not going on right now. We don't have the live streaming at YouTube, but well, we put it on demand, so don't worry about it. And yes, I do have my webpage where you can see, well, it's my narcissist space where you can see what I do at work. But you can also watch the TLC transmissions and the links to the previous cast. And that's at Homers 2000 with double M and numbers, homers2000.wixsite.com/PDHA. And the link is also above, and you can click there and you can get to my website and surf around and see what you can find.
And I also have on my website at benjaminlstewart.wordpress.com. I have a link called, or a tab at the very top, or a page, I should say, Teacher Learning Cast. And there you should be able to see the broadcast as well. I understand maybe we're having some technical difficulties right now, but it will be made available there. All recordings will be posted to that page as well. And we're trying to find the best way to organize all of our video content so that it can be easily found.
Right.
So, Piry, I know that you had
finally, before going on, just remind everybody to get involved, please. The idea of this cast, of these transmissions, is to get communication flowing, and we would like to hear from you right now. You can post it on Facebook or by any source. You can send it to us, email or whatever. But you can do it later on when you look at the on-demand transmission, and you can contact us. You can give us your comments, ask questions, request for topics, and we want to invite you to come. We want you all to be part of this, and if possible, we are available for you to show up to the transmission, and we want to make this part the core of this transmission. You guys getting involved, but I know it's just the beginning. And thank you for watching. So what's next, Ben?
Well, next, I think you had some interesting comments. It's kind of related to what we talked about in the first segment, bringing context into EFL classroom. So could you share with us a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of content-based learning?
Right. Yes, I was thinking about many topics for this week, but this is one of the aspects I normally take with my students, and we always I'm kind of always naggy about having context in the classes, and this is because of the idea that here in our context we are in Aguascalientes, Mexico, and here in our context, education leads for the idea of the teacher presenting information and the students just following and doing some practices about it. And the focus is that, just to have some information in which students will practice, no matter what kind of practice it is, as long as they practice the information that was given by the teacher. So I met with my teachers' information about adding a context, adding a real context to the classroom. I found, I want to share with you guys, I found this. I don't know if you can look at my screen right now, and you're going to see.
Yes, I see it.
How to set a context. I found this is one of the shares that are quick views about main elements, quick guides for main elements in the classroom. I just wanted to see you all. It's very short. You can read it, but it's really concise and precise on different aspects. Obviously, well, it's focusing on this different aspects, which are topic, context, function, and form. The guys at Facebook may not be able to see it right now because we are doing the official transmission in a different way, but you can go back on demand and look at this at the link and this idea. But what I want to focus on isn't the aspect of the context. It says context, the where and why of the language situation, taken to a friend who is looking for a job, that is looking for a job. That's a context, right? If you go through the reading, it gives you a little bit of idea of the context idea. But I wanted to make different aspects because context is not that simple. It's not just thinking about what I'm going to bring into the classroom. And I managed to separate two different points of view of context. The first one is whether to set a topic of interest for students, a broad context. In other words, something like if you're talking about health, if you are talking about sports, if you're talking about famous people, if you're talking about Hollywood, or whatever you bring into the classroom, into the English classroom, right? But you may be able to be more specific, and you may be able to have a situational context. Now, yes, you may talk about health, but the question is, what about health, and what exactly is the situation in which you would talk about health? I don't know if I'm making this through. It's not just going to medicine, but in which situations of life you actually talk about medicine. Does it make sense, man, to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we look at context, we're looking at basically everything that's not linguistic, right? The whole situation, and just remove the language part, and you basically have the context. So for me, what I think of relationships, what's the relationships between the speakers? What's the purpose? Not necessarily the linguistic function, but the purpose of the situation, the purpose of the doing or being in that situation, maybe some historical accounts of the relationships between these people, or the relationships between the people and the place. And right. So it really looks at every possible aspect of a situation, but removing the language part. And so as teachers, we try to think of that. How can we bring that as much as possible to the situation, to the classroom, so that students are not just thinking language, but they're thinking beyond language, right. and in terms of relationships and historical context, etc.
Right, and it can be as simple as just making the right questions. The context is not just about the topic, but also the where and the why you are going to use the language. It would be something like that's the question I constantly bring to my teachers' information is, in which action of life you would do that. You would use that piece of language, whether vocabulary or grammar or structure or whatever you are developing in them. If you're talking about listening, in which situations of life you would normally listen to this piece of language. And maybe the class is focused only on presenting vocabulary, repetitions, and pronunciation in order for making students go through all these processes or different approaches to do it. But even at that moment, if you raise the question, in which situations of the real life they would use this vocabulary and what for, why, this may lead you even to modify even the material you use. The where and the why, it's really important because it's not the same to talk about, let's go back to the example of medicine. It's not the same to talk about medicine with the doctor at the doctor office, or talking about medicine with friends at a coffee place in which you happen to discuss the situation of somebody being sick, right? Or being not that well in their health. So, and that's teacher's decision according to going back to the topic we discussed earlier, how well you know your students, and what can you actually bring into the classroom, and what will make them become the leaders and leading the classroom because of the context itself, right?
Yeah, I think that knowing your students really is the difference between knowing what the topic or the activity, if it's relevant, if it's meaningful for the students. I mean, it could be meaningful. Showing them how to change a tire might be meaningful, but it may not be relevant depending on the profile of the student. So I think this idea of context, knowing the where and the why of the situation, again, is okay, is this relevant for the students? I always tell my students when they're thinking about, they're in front of a class and they're teaching, is be prepared for those students that in the back of the class raising their hand asking, teacher, why are we doing this? Why are we learning this particular topic? Why are we doing this? And hopefully whatever they're doing with their students, it's going to be obvious what the value is, what the relevance is, but it may not be. So we need to be prepared also as teachers to be able to articulate that, to be able to explain, okay, well, this is why you need to know this. This is why this is important. But I think thinking of context and really in your lesson planning, when you're thinking about how you're going to bring together the why and the where of the context, try to keep that in mind. I think it's important to keep that relevance in mind so that everything that they do has some relevance, right? That's our goal, right?
Right. And you bring to my mind, a couple of weeks, I gave a presentation on the use of language. I think I mentioned that last week, the use of language and the use of voice in the classroom. And one of the aspects is that the audience, when you speak, they just care about three things mainly, which is, what is it that you have to say? The core thing of it. Why do I need to know that? And how do I do it? And that's it. If everything else it's not relevant. And that's pretty much what you just said, right? When I think about a context, it's that you need to know the whys and the hows, the situation of that piece of language that you are going to teach. But I want to go a little bit beyond, because that's not the only aspect we can focus on dividing or completing the context. There are also another aspect that I manage, which is having an explicit context or having a content integrated context. Let me re-explain a little bit, because these are words that just come from my mind and I put them like that. But these are technical concepts based on theory, right? The explicit context would be the idea of telling students the situation and trying to simulate the situation in the classroom, making students aware directly or indirectly that it's a simulation of real life, right? So once you decided the where, the why, and the situation of the real life, you simulate with the students and they know they are in a play and they are in a role and they are in a simulation. Whether you just tell them to imagine, whether you bring an image, whether you give them a role or something, okay? But there's another way to bring context, which is directly without simulating, actually having a content class in which the content itself occurs in the classroom. Like going back to the previous talk, I think it's one example, right? This the teacher from the article you read us, Ben, a while ago, she had a situation, a real life situation, losing the briefcase, and then having students with experience about aspects related to the situation, and managing to have a real context in the classroom in which everybody got involved, got interested in the class, and it was not a simulation, it was something real. So the question in here, and this is the food for thought about this topic, is what would you do with your students that will actually have them really consider the context as the main important part of the class, while you as a teacher care about the language, right? But what will you bring that is not simulated, that is actually real for students? What do you think about it? Or what would you do, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question. I mean, that's the question I think we all try to consider when we think, how authentic can our classroom experience be? And for me, the first thing that I think about is some sort of service learning. Service learning being that there are many causes out in the world. There are many real life problems. If we want to look at problem-based learning, for example,
Right.
what kind of problems that are currently out there that students can be a part of? Okay, maybe they don't have all of the solutions, and maybe it's not even important that they solve any particular problem, but maybe they work towards a problem. Maybe they better understand a problem by getting engaged and looking at how they can become involved. I think technology, we always talk a lot about technology, but technology really affords us opportunities and affords our students to become involved, to be part of the actual community, and try to find ways to solve problems, work towards problems, or better understand problems. And I think this is the question. I think even pre-service English language teachers, it's never too early to begin thinking about how they can really start incorporating their experiences and the real world experiences into the classroom.
Right. Yeah, and I'm always enjoying the talks with you, because you bring really interesting points that remind me a lot of situations that I've lived in my classroom. I just right now, with your comment, I remember we read an article about the challenges of being a teacher, being a new teacher, getting to the real world. But one of the key aspects in there is that the author mentioned that we need to make students to have the questions for themselves, to question themselves. I mean, whatever we present in the classroom has to be something that the students needs to know, because they already have the question. So the first part of teaching would be making students to raise the question. And he put it in a simple way. Why would you give an answer to something that students have never the curiosity to know or to answer, right? And yes, this context idea and this idea of the wheres and the whys, it's helping us to raise the questions, right? If you set a proper context of interest, which raises the interest of students, which has a proper wondering, or the proper key to make them feel the need to use that piece of language, it's going to work. And just, well, my point today was this, to make the difference between, all right, the context has divided into a broad context, just having a background of it, which a wide topic, and being specific about the situation in which you would use in real life that context, and the other division, whether am I going to simulate it in the classroom, or I'm going to prepare everything to make it something real for students.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would end with that is, the communication again is important, and we focus on communication, but I think it's really about relationships, and having our students realize how understanding the context, the where and the why, understanding how they can improve and become better communicators, really at the end of the day allows them to have better relationships. So I think if we can help them realize the relationships that they currently have and how they can form and continually to grow those relationships through their understandings of the language and of the content and of the situation, I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, right. And that's a question for everybody. How do you bring context into your classroom, teachers? Do you often bring context into your classroom? Do you simulate the context, or do you actually bring something that more like task-based approaches, like doing real context in the classroom? All right, how we're doing in time, Ben?
We're okay here. We've got probably 20 minutes left, so more or less.
Okay, and we remind everybody that we have different sources for streaming. Today we have technical problems with the YouTube streaming, but you can follow on demand later on, and maybe you are watching right now on demand. And just we want you to share with us, give us comments about the topics, send us questions, and work with us, because right now we are getting into what I want to make a weekly thing, share an actual vivid experience of the week, something we have read, something we came across, a situation it happened to us, and we invite you to share with us your week situations. All right, Ben, what was your situation this week?
Yeah, I'd like to add before I get into my experience too, one last thing too, just to our listeners, as Piry introduced a question asking everyone how they would introduce context or content into their own classroom. We really recommend, or we have no problem revisiting certain topics again in another week. So for example, next week, if you want to come in and share some of your experiences in our broadcast, we would love that. That's why we're here. This is why we're doing it. So we really have no problem revisiting any of the topics that we've seen in the past. If it's something that you want to bring and share, that's what we're all about. This is why we're doing this. So I just want to throw that out there. Really, everyone has an open invitation. It's just a matter of getting with us, and so that we can schedule it and bring it in to the live experience. So speaking of live experience, we have a segment here. It's one of my favorite segments right now, is sharing experiences. And what we try to do on a weekly basis is to think about, reflect on the current week, and see what we can share. So this week, I'd like to share briefly an experience. Again, I'm going to share my screen here so that I can show you a recent post, a piece that I did looking at a recent classroom experience that I had, and I titled the piece "Academic Writing Self-Assessment." This week I am teaching a 4th semester composition class, and we're working on our first essay. And we've been working on it for some time, maybe 3 weeks or so, putting together a 5-paragraph essay. And this is an academic essay where students are expected to cite and use APA, the American Psychological Association writing format for citing and referencing different sources. And what I tried this week, and I've never taken this exact approach before, but I wanted to share and have a group discussion with my students about certain writing errors. So what I did was I went through and looked at their Google Docs. All of my students have an individual Google Doc that's shared with me, so that I can also go in and make comments, make changes, or make suggestions to their work. And what I did was I went through, without really leaving a lot of comments, but just kind of getting a feel for certain errors that I saw throughout the group, came up with a list. The list, in fact, that you see here. This list is in no particular order, but there are some, I would label, common academic writing errors that I commonly see, not just in this group, but in every group that I come across. These are errors that I speak probably 80 to 90% of my time on. So they're very, very common. So I created a list, and with the class as a group, I basically took one point or one error at a time, and we looked at each one and discussed them. So we're in class. All of our students have internet access. All of my students have some sort of device. I would say probably 60% of them have a laptop, because again, this is a writing class, so it's comfortable for most students to use a standard keyboard. Everybody else, all the other students, probably 40 or so percent, they use their cellular phone. All right, but they all have access to their document, their Google document, in class in real time. So what we do is I take each error at a time, and they go through and make those changes one at a time. So I'll give them a few minutes for each one of these as they go through and make some of the changes. Now, some of these errors require more time that they can possibly do in one class. But the point is that I want them to at least understand the error and ask questions if they're not sure how to fix the error or how to identify the error, so that we take each one in turn as a group, and we kind of work as a group to go through some of these, again, common errors that I typically see. So we tried it this week. I did record the session, and I recorded it as a video, but decided later to just upload it as a podcast, as just an audio file. And I just, for those who are interested, I'm using Internet Archive for my repository, my audio repository, but it embeds very nicely here into this post. I wanted my students then to have access to this post in my website so that they could go back to the list if they need to, and if needed, they could also go back to the audio. But I'm still going through some of the, we're still going through some of the changes in the documents. I did notice after I implemented this class that students were still making a lot of the changes. So I'm still evaluating whether or not, how successful or not this particular class was. But I think my change in approach this time around was the first time providing feedback, less comments directly in the document, and having them have more of an opportunity to self-assess so that they can start looking at their own particular errors. And one thing I forgot to mention that was really the reason for doing this. I wanted the students to create 2 columns. So as they were looking at each of the errors, they put in one column things that they did well, and in the second column things that they needed to consider, or maybe things that they needed to look into or ask questions about later, but that they have 2 columns. And my hope, it was that going through here that they could first see what they do well, because invariably some students they're not missing, they don't have all of these errors at once. They do some of these things fine, other things they need to work on. But I wanted them to recognize the things that they already do well. And as we do this, if I decide to do this in a future essay, over time, the hope is that they will see that they're making less errors, or they're improving in certain types of errors, but that they'll have the self-awareness through the self-assessment process of improving their writing.
Van, and I'm just amazed, because it's raising in my mind the idea that I don't know if you noticed that, but this is self-assessment, but at the same time, this is shared with everybody else. And the resources, the technology is giving you the opportunity of having, again, a different format from a traditional point of view. What I mean is we have self-assessment, we have tutors assessment, and we have peer assessment, we have external assessment, but this kind of assessment becomes something different. And I think, and I suppose there are other teachers doing something similar, right? But I wonder if anybody has ever reflected on the idea that this is a new term for assessment, because it's a self-assessment which is not only self-assessment, it's shared, it's open, and other students can go through it, and it provokes them to have their own self-assessment, but at the same time based on somebody else's assessment, which I think changes the picture, right? It would be interesting to talk about this deeply in a further cast, and see if we can find any leads about this new format. It came to my mind the idea of communication. Before we had the speaker, the message, and the receiver, and now with technology it all changes. But this is also the same, right? It's self-evaluation, which is not only the student himself evaluating himself with a guide. It's much more than that.
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I talk a lot about with my students, because since my students, as your students, I'm sure you can relate that, right. We set the example, for better or for worse. We're setting the example. I mean, they're looking at us and looking at what we do and evaluating, okay, is this good or is this not? Is what the teacher's doing, do we agree with his pedagogical approach or do we not? And that's normal, and that's what we want our students to be doing as future teachers. So
Yeah.
one of the things I want them to realize is that I know that I ask my students to work transparently, and some students may or may not be used to doing that. But there is a reason, and I want them to show that even though I'm asking them to work transparently, I, as their instructor, am also working transparently in that the way that I'm evaluating my sharing today with everyone, what I'm doing with my students and how I'm evaluating, I'm being assessed as well. People are looking at me and saying, okay, that either is the dumbest idea I've ever seen, or that might be something to consider. And that is something that I have to accept. In fact, I personally embrace that because in my post, there's a little comment section at the bottom. So if someone wants to share and agree or disagree, show another perspective, or share a variation on what I'm doing, or make a suggestion, it's all good. It's all good. And so for me, this is why I like to do this, not just for just for the pleasure of doing. I mean, but I like to do this because I want to show students that I'm also being critiqued, that I'm also being under the magnifying glass when others are looking at other educators who have more experience than I do, have more knowledge and experiences that they are critiquing, whether they decide to leave a comment or not, whether they decide to follow or not. But that's kind of the point. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is really just this beyond the classroom experience with just the students, but also now the teachers being part of the evaluative process. And we can take it a step further. And, I could, in my class, give out a questionnaire where I ask them, okay, how do you feel about the class? How are things going? Or did you like when I did this particular thing, or whatever? That's something that's a possibility, but it can't happen until we as the teachers decide, okay, I'm willing to make my own teaching practice more transparent.
Right, and that raises the bar, and that gets you out of the comfort zone and makes you do better for the right reason that you decided to do better. Nobody else has to supervise you. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or we can.
No, I want to leave some time for your shared experience.
Yeah, I just want to tell to the Facebook people that is watching that I'm running out of battery, so the transmission at Facebook Live may run off very soon. But you can watch on demand at the live streaming in YouTube. The link is up there, and it will be there. Right now, we have some tech problems with the live transmission at YouTube, but it will be on demand after the show. So just in case the Facebook Live runs out. And my experience of the week, this week I've been struggling a little bit with the students in different ways, mainly about feedback. I want to talk about feedback. And this is my situation is teachers' information and teachers who are preparing lesson plans, having classes, observing teachers, but at all moment they reflect. And but the most important thing is when they come with their lesson plans. All of the aspects are important, right? But when they come with their lesson plans and we have a feedback on their lesson plans, or when they have already taught a class and they have feedback on the class, the struggling of it. And I want to focus on one aspect. There's a lot to say about feedback. There's a lot to talk about and to discuss. But I want to focus mainly on one of the first aspects from Pendleton, who's an academic from medicine, and he is one of the traditional experts on feedback given. And maybe I can share this very quickly because I even have an image. I don't know if you see in my back part right here. This is my Pendleton model for feedback, so I can keep it outside at all time. Let me share with you very quickly this. I don't know if you can see my screen, Ben.
Yes.
Can you see that? Perhaps the best known model initially recommended for medical interns.
Wait, it's still coming up. 1 second.
Okay.
Are you in your browser now?
Yeah, I'm sharing an image. I don't know if you can see that. Now, okay, get it. Yeah, I know what happened there. Sorry, I shared the wrong screen.
Okay.
Let me go back again. So very quickly, you see this. Here it is. Is this one? And that's that. Now you can see the.
There we go. That's
right.
it.
This is something I found out in the images at Facebook, right? But it's based on Pendleton model. I mean, it's Pendleton model for feedback. And I want you to call the attention to the first one. It says check the observee once and it's ready for feedback. And I'm going to stop right there about the technical aspect. Because this is what I struggle with this week. The students' mood for feedback, being ready for feedback. It was in different moments during the week that I saw students in different reactions towards the situation of having the feedback. Some of them expressed it, some of them didn't. Some of them look anxious. Some of them were not really willing to receive the feedback because of any reason, right? And I become aware. I always try to follow this model, and I always try to be careful about the students being ready to receive the feedback. But at the end, I managed to realize I tend to, anyhow, no matter what, I managed to give the feedback. And what happened to me this week is that there was a situation with a student in which it was not the right moment to have feedback by any reason. So whatever I said would come in a misinterpretation from the student. And there was a moment in which he even externed that there was a lack of communication that started that with the person that is going to receive the feedback not being in the mood, not being ready for the feedback, and me as the tutor giving the feedback not working in that aspect and getting into the point because of matters of time. So my experience of the week is based. I wouldn't like to be much more specific about it, but I think I made my point in there. We need to be very careful when we are going to and taking your comment about all the people critiquing our work or what we do. We need to be careful on having a same tone. Or maybe not the same mood, but maybe the same tone, and agree on the communication channel so that we are all open to go back and forth in this situation of the feedback, to have the proper questions, to have the proper answers, and also the tone so that it becomes meaningful. It wouldn't be relevant if the feedback goes on, if we evaluate, it's kind of assessment. It's having assessment with the students and giving them information about assessment, and it wouldn't be relevant if it doesn't get through. So there's a way in which we should ease the situation with the students and with ourselves, because sometimes we are not ready to give the feedback, or we are not in the mood to give the feedback, and it's something that caught my attention this week, and for sure it's something I'm going to remember every time I give feedback.
I'm curious. Can you bring up that list again? Because I know that you only want to talk about the first one, but
right.
Can we look at that just really for 1 second? Because I have a question that kind of relates, I think, more than just to the first.
Right.
All right. So yeah. Okay. Let me. I'm gonna click on. Okay. So. Yeah, so your main focus is on the first point. Check the observee once and is ready for feedback.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the rest of the points here. States the observee states what was done well. The observer states what was done well. Sorry, PD, I think you have another browser up.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I forgot I was sharing my screen.
Okay, no
I was going to make a comment on the Facebook live streaming. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So I'm curious, in your experience, PD, as a tutor,
right?
I'm looking at these, and I guess are these in any particular order?
Oh, well, it tends to be in an order, but I came to realize it doesn't really have to follow that order according to the situation, because sometimes certain topics raise the back and forth with the students. So So you cannot wait for everything to be said by students and then everything by the tutor and then everything in a conclusion. Maybe you can get to back and forth and then you conclude on one issue and you skip to the next one. So, but originally this is the model to follow when in order.
Yeah, I was wondering if we ever just outright ask the students, "Are you ready to receive feedback?" And I know that no, but I think that that's even a valid question, because even, of course, we want to try to pick up the clues and all of that, but
Right.
but even them externalizing if they are ready or not ready, and why they are ready or why they're not ready, and
Right.
have them share that with, even before you have the conversation, if that's even a worthy consideration.
It's curious that you mentioned that, because it's exactly what happened. When I had this student telling me I'm not. When I asked a couple of questions, he couldn't answer. So he was like saying like, I'm not in a thinking way. I'm not in the mood for thinking right now, and continue with this. What I tend to do, I expand the reflection at the moment of the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that a couple of times, and I never asked that question at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened there is that since I didn't ask the question, I was just inferring he's tired or he doesn't want to be here. It's late afternoon, and that was my inference. But there was a moment in which I did ask the question, but it was maybe a little bit late because he had a different perception of the situation. He never realizes he was in that mood since the very beginning. So he focused on a different aspect, on a different moment of the feedback, and he attributed his mood to that moment of the feedback. I don't know if I'm making myself clear in that sense. He attributed his mood to something I would have said during the feedback, but I can tell that he had the mood since before. And the problem is that I never asked that question.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking, even if he can pinpoint why, whether you as or we as tutors know or not, whether we know, just by having the person communicate that, articulate that,
yes,
might be part of the way that we get to a point where he or she becomes ready to receive feedback. Because that's it. It is teaching is it's very easy to take it personally.
Right.
Right. And one of the things that I tell teacher trainers is that take teaching seriously. Don't take it personally.
Right.
Take it seriously, but don't take it personally. So when somebody's critiquing you, somebody doesn't agree with you, take it all in. Take it seriously. You decide what to take, what not to take, what to consider, what not to consider, but try not to take it personally. And believe me, I know it's easy to say, hard to do. We're all human beings. This is a very personal, endeavor. It's a profession that we feel passionate about. We want to help people. And I think all of our intentions are always good. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's easy to take things personally. So yeah, I think that's an interesting experience. I really appreciate you sharing that, and I think it really makes us all reflect on our own teaching, whether we're in whether we're a tutor or not. We as teachers are always taking on a role of tutor in certain cases, and I think we can all relate to that. Where I can see in my students, I can detect sometimes when they're not ready. And there are times where I know that I don't detect it and I don't realize it, and they're just not ready, So it is kind of a dance back and forth between, okay, how much space do I give them? When do I intervene? When do I not? And yeah, it's just kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning here, knowing our students and really try to form that relationship that allows for communication to happen so that we work together. It really is a two-way communicative, relationship that has to happen for everybody to succeed.
It makes me wonder in the cases in which the teacher just comes to the classroom, gives back an exam or something with a grade in there, and it stops there. It makes me wonder about that, because that's feedback too for students, what kind of feedback it is, and beyond going through the analysis of just giving back a grade, forget about that. Think about which is the student's mood to receive that information at that moment. Since the one that it may be that is not really relevant to which grade he's getting for himself or herself. It's not relevant for me whether I get a 6, a 7, a 9, or a 0, or the ones that are really apprehensive in the sense that if I got a 9, I need urgently to know why and which was my mistake or something like that. And it makes me wonder, something related to this same thing is, are they ready? What is this going to cause in them? What's the backwash effect of having this feedback, whether as simple as giving a grade or as complex as having a back and forth in a reflection?
Perhaps we should change the title, the sessions, from feedback sessions to self-awareness sessions, because really it's about the self-awareness. The feedback is arbitrary. I mean, really, you know, what we as tutors say is not nearly as important as the
what
effect
they have to say
on the students and their own self-awareness and their own growth. And so, but yeah.
And there's another topic we can take later on, because we can discuss about feedback, many things. And yes, I totally agree with you. There are things that they have to become self-aware, and there are things they are not willing to become self-aware, and you need to start opening the door somehow. And we can discuss about on a further show, because I think it's time to finish our cast from today. Sadly, my Facebook Live, my mobile phone died today, with the battery died, and I stopped the cast a while ago, but it's going to be on demand for everybody. And I think for today, anything else, Ben?
No, I just want to thank everybody for hanging in there. I know we're still learning ourselves, trying to get some of the technological glitches out of the way. We had some problems this week, but hopefully we can salvage this recording and get it out and available. But we want to share appreciation, gratitude to those who have who try to follow us live and who watch the recordings. We really do want to hear from you. We want to know what kind of topics you want to hear. If something is resonating with you that we're talking about each week, let us know. We really want to hear your comments, the good and the bad, the ugly. We want to hear it all because we can all learn from those. So we're doing this because we want to reach out to the community and start a conversation, be part of the conversation. We don't want we don't expect to have all the answers, but we want to begin the conversation so we can hear from others in the field around common educational topics that we can relate to, that we face on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, everyone. Piry, thank you very much as well for participating. And we're going to be continuing this Saturday broadcast, usually in the morning around 8:30-ish. And so set your clocks, set your alarms, and again, get involved. Let us know. Give us some feedback about what you think of our show, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. So for me,
right, Ben, I just want to remind them the ways that they can access and have information about Teacher Learning Cast. And I'm going to abruptly share a little bit my screen with this information. We have the Facebook page. If you look for us, it's Facebook as TLC ELT, and you can reach information. There's Benjamin's website also, and there's the link, which is benjaminlstewart.wordpress.com, and you can reach his page, and you can also reach my page at homers2000wixsite.com. Piry Herrera Alvarado. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Ben, for sharing this experience. I hopefully will see you next week.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Keep learning.